Today, we're going to talk about a crisis of trust. The widespread skepticism of medical science and public health institutions is almost universally framed as a problem of misinformation, a plague of irrationality spread through social media, infecting a gullible public. But that's not the whole story. The public's distrust is not a sign of scientific illiteracy, but a calculated, rational response to the system itself. To begin to understand why so many people are questioning science, we must first look unflinchingly at the moments science betrayed them. Whether it's the state-sanctioned human experiments and corporate scandals that prioritize profit over life, the corrupted architecture of modern scientific research, the deep financial conflicts of interest that compromise objectivity, the illusion of safety created by profoundly broken reporting systems, or the high-stakes biosecurity risks that this flawed system now enables, skepticism toward an institution that has repeatedly violated the public trust is not irrational. It is a learned behavior. Public distrust can therefore be a measured act of self-preservation, rooted in a well-documented history of institutional ethical failures, corporate malfeasance, and systemic conflicts of interest. It's tempting to view historical atrocities as relics, unfortunate but isolated events from a less enlightened time. This is a mistake, however. These events are not mere anecdotes. They are foundational data points. They have collectively shaped public consciousness, providing a logical and evidentiary basis for questioning the motives of institutional authority, whether that authority wears the lab coat of a scientist or the uniform of a government official. Consider the mindset of a government that views its own citizens as raw material for experimentation. During the Cold War, the United States government conducted extensive human radiation experiments, but the most damning evidence of its ethical void is not found in the experiments themselves, but in the policy of concealment designed to preempt accountability. The proof is in their own words. A 1947 memorandum from the Atomic Energy Commission gave explicit advice: do not make these experiments public. Why? Because, and I quote, they might have an adverse effect on public opinion or result in legal suits. This was about liability management, not public safety. It was a deliberate strategy to place state agendas and legal immunity above the fundamental human right to informed consent, a direct violation of the Nuremberg Code. This pattern of abusing vulnerable populations is not unique. In the 1940s and 50s, the Canadian government conducted nutritional experiments on over 1,300 Indigenous people, 1,000 of whom were children in residential schools. The government was fully aware that the severe malnutrition in these schools was a direct result of its own chronic underfunding. Instead of rectifying the problem, researchers exploited it. They treated these starving children as a convenient cohort of test subjects, deliberately withholding milk rations to less than half the recommended amount for years, and establishing control groups of malnourished children who received no supplements at all. These acts, which have been described as part of Canada's genocide of its Indigenous peoples, established a chilling precedent that the state, in the name of science, has been willing to inflict and sustain harm on the very people it is sworn to protect. This history provides a rational fear that government mandates can be driven by agendas far removed from individual safety and consent. If the state has proven itself capable of betrayal, the private corporation has demonstrated a calculus that is often just as dangerous. The history of the pharmaceutical industry is littered with scandals, but few illustrate the prioritization of profit over human life as clearly as the cases of thalidomide and Vioxx. Thalidomide, marketed in the late 1950s, left a devastating legacy of birth defects, a tragedy that exposed the world to the catastrophic potential of inadequately tested drugs. Decades later, the Vioxx scandal proved that the lessons had not been learned. Approved in 1999, Merck's painkiller quickly became a multi-billion-dollar blockbuster. Yet, by June of 2000, the company's own Vigar study revealed a shocking signal. Vioxx users suffered 5 times as many heart attacks as those taking a comparator drug. Rather than sound the alarm, Merck engaged in a strategic campaign of obfuscation, attributing the discrepancy to the supposed protective qualities of the other drug, not a flaw in their own. The FDA issued a warning letter about this deceptive promotional campaign in 2001, but the drug remained on the market for 3 more years. It was only withdrawn in 2004 after another internal study confirmed it could double the risk of heart attack or stroke. This was not a scientific oversight, it was a business decision. For years, a company with clear data of lethal harm chose to protect its revenue stream. These events teach the public a painful but rational lesson: that a company's internal knowledge of lethal harm is not a sufficient motivator for action when billions of dollars are at stake. This frames public skepticism not as a feeling, but as a learned, evidence-based conclusion. These historical betrayals are not forgotten. They echo in the present, providing a logical starting point for skepticism toward the very institutions that govern scientific research today. The failures of the past were not simply the product of a few bad actors. They were symptoms of a deeper systemic vulnerability that persists and has, in many ways, worsened. The modern architecture of scientific research and oversight has been fundamentally compromised by the pervasive influence of money, creating a system where truth is often secondary to profit. The pharmaceutical industry now occupies the commanding heights of medical research. It funds the vast majority of clinical trials, as many as 75% published in top medical journals, and in doing so, it often retains disturbing control over the trial design, the data, and the final interpretation of the results. Influential academic experts, the supposed arbiters of scientific truth, are routinely hired as consultants, establishing a powerful network of financial allegiances. This financial capture extends directly to the bodies charged with ethical oversight. Studies have shown that nearly half of the medical faculty members serving on institutional review boards also have financial ties to the very industry they are supposed to be regulating. These boards, designed to protect human subjects, are often unable to countervail the immense pressure of commercial interests. In the court case Grimes versus Kennedy Krieger Institute, an institutional review board was found to have actively encouraged researchers to misrepresent their study's purpose, specifically to bring it under a lower safety standard. This isn't a modern flaw. It's the institutionalization of the same mindset seen in the 1947 Atomic Energy Commission memo. A willingness to manipulate ethical standards and conceal information to serve an institutional agenda. Only this time the agenda is profit, not national security. When the watchdogs are on the payroll of those they are watching, the system is no longer one of oversight. It is one of institutionalized scientific bias. Perhaps the most critical failure of the modern system lies in how we measure harm. The entire risk-benefit analysis of any medical intervention, particularly vaccines, rests upon our ability to accurately track adverse events. This analysis is the bedrock of public health policy, yet it is built on a foundation of sand. Our primary tools are passive surveillance systems like the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System in the United States. These systems require a patient or clinician to recognize an adverse event, connect it to a vaccine, and then take the time to file a report. The result is a catastrophic failure of data collection. The national academies have concluded that these systems capture only a tiny fraction of the true number of adverse events. The FDA itself has acknowledged this, with some estimates suggesting that as few as 1 in 10 events are ever reported. But the reality may be far worse. A pilot study of an automated electronic health record-based system called ESP-VAERS unleashed a staggering 30-fold increase in the odds of a report being filed. And a study of healthcare professionals in Poland, people who are trained to recognize and report these events, revealed a massive discrepancy between the adverse events following immunizations they experienced and the number that ever made it into official government reports. When the true rate of harm is systematically obscured and underreported by potentially orders of magnitude, any official claim about a product's risk-benefit profile is fundamentally unreliable. Public skepticism in the face of such uncertainty, therefore, is not just understandable, it is a logical and necessary position. This corrupted system doesn't just fail to see the past and present clearly, it actively enables the even higher stakes threats of our modern era. The systemic flaws we've discussed are not exclusively academic. They create the perfect conditions for catastrophic modern risks to emerge and for public perception to be manipulated on a global scale. In an age of advanced biotechnology and information warfare, the stakes have never been higher. Let's talk about gain-of-function research. This is a field of study where scientists modify pathogens, sometimes to make them more virulent or more transmissible, with the stated goal of understanding them better to develop vaccines and treatments. This research presents what is known as a dual-use dilemma. The knowledge created can be used for good, but it can also be used for harm. It could be accidentally released from a lab, or it could be intentionally deployed as a bioweapon. Now, consider the scenario of a deliberately released pathogen, engineered for the purpose of profit. This is often dismissed as a conspiracy theory, but let's analyze it from a position of cold policy realism. We've established the immense financial incentives that a global pandemic creates for pharmaceutical companies who hold the proprietary cure. We've reviewed the documented history of corporations like Merck prioritizing blockbuster profits over clear signals of mortality. And we now face an era where potent biotechnologies are increasingly accessible, with AI models that could dramatically lower the barrier for a malicious actor to plan and execute such an attack. When you connect these three realities, the motive, the precedent, and the means, the possibility of a manufactured pandemic for profit moves from the realm of fringe theory to that of a credible high-consequence national security threat. To manage such a crisis, or any public health initiative where compliance is paramount, requires shaping public opinion. Here, the intellectual framework of Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky is illuminating. They argued that mass media and government institutions function to manufacture consent for elite agendas. The public, in this view, is a bewildered herd that must be guided and controlled through the engineering of consent. This model applies with chilling precision to the public health sphere. When skepticism and dissent arise, even when rooted in the documented evidence we've explored here today, they are frequently filtered out by an elite consensus. Authorities and media outlets often dismiss legitimate, evidence-based criticism as dangerous misinformation. This tactic serves a crucial function. It protects the dominant corporate scientific paradigm from scrutiny and maintains public compliance with official mandates. It creates an environment where rational questioning is reframed as a public menace, insulating the system from the very accountability it so desperately needs. The crisis we face is therefore not just one of science, but of the narratives that control it. The path forward cannot be found in minor tweaks or better messaging. It requires a fundamental change in the scientific paradigm itself. This is not an argument against science. On the contrary, this is a passionate argument for its restoration. The current model, the paradigm that governs our approach to medicine, research, and public health, is broken. To regain public trust and for science to reclaim its role as an objective arbiter of truth, we don't just need reform, we need a revolution. The philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn described scientific progress as a series of paradigm shifts. A period of normal science operates under a dominant, accepted framework. But over time, significant anomalies, problems that the paradigm cannot explain or contain, begin to accumulate. This leads to a state of crisis, which is eventually resolved by a scientific revolution, where a new paradigm overthrows the old one. Our current paradigm of normal science is characterized by corporate funding, regulatory capture, the suppression of negative data, and unresolved biosafety risks. The historical scandals, the systemic underreporting of harm, and the existential threat of gain-of-function research are the significant anomalies that this paradigm can no longer sweep under the rug. The gatekeepers of the current paradigm, the captured regulators, the conflicted journal editors, the corporate-funded researchers, are not failing to see the anomalies. Their job, under the current system, is to explain them away. This is why reform is insufficient. The system isn't broken, it is functioning as designed to protect itself. The system is in crisis because it is failing to produce what it promises: objective, trustworthy knowledge that serves the public good. A true scientific revolution requires a new paradigm that is, in Kuhn's terms, incommensurate with the old one. It cannot be a minor adjustment. It must be a complete structural overhaul based on a different set of foundational principles. This new contract between science and society must be built on a radical commitment to transparency and accountability. Imagine a future where the publication of all clinical trial data, positive, negative, and null, is mandatory and independently audited by bodies completely free from industry funding. Imagine a world where financial conflicts of interest are eliminated from regulatory oversight, where serving on an institutional review board or an FDA advisory panel while taking money from the companies you regulate is not just discouraged, but illegal. Picture a public health system where passive, broken adverse event surveillance is replaced by proactive, automated monitoring systems built into our electronic health records, finally giving us a true, real-time quantification of risk. And envision a global commitment to biosecurity where high-risk research is governed by rigorous international accountability, prioritizing our collective safety over the speed of discovery. Only by forging this new paradigm can science hope to restore its credibility. Only then can we honor the sacred principle of informed consent, which is meaningless without a full and honest accounting of both risks and benefits. And only through this revolution can we re-establish a relationship between science and society that is based not on manufactured consent, but on genuine, earned trust and shared human agency.